Hello, good morning. My name is Simeon from Whitehorse Surveyors, and today is a beautiful, crisp spring morning in Wiltshire, and we shall be carrying out a HomeBuyers inspection on a converted first floor flat within a larger period property built circa 1800. A HomeBuyer report provides a prospective purchaser on the condition of the property. It would generally be more appropriate for a newer property, i.e. from 1920s onwards. We would aim to, the inspection itself would probably take about 2 hours normally, and we would aim to get the report back to the customer within 5 to 6 working days. A building survey, the inspection time would take approximately 4 hours, and we would aim to get the report to the customer within 6 to 7 working days. It's important to choose the right report. A HomeBuyers report would be more suitable for a more modern property built generally 1900 to 1920s onwards, more modern properties, and a building survey would be more appropriate for older, larger properties, particularly if they're listed or if they've been altered and there are issues. For the homebuyer and the building survey, the inspection is fairly similar. In the respect that the same items are being identified, so we look at all the external elements and all the internal elements where visible, together with any outbuildings. The difference being, on a home buyer report, we provide a description of the construction, a commentary on the condition and actions if required. On a building survey, much more time is allowed, so we provide a detailed description of the construction, a more detailed commentary on the condition. We aim to follow the trail to any problems, to identify all of the problems and make recommendations to resolve those problems, which you won't necessarily receive in a homebuyer report. We follow the new RICS format for the homebuyer and building survey, which involves the condition rating system. So for each element we flag up, we give each element a condition rating, either condition rating 1, which is routine maintenance only, no immediate repairs required, condition rating 2, which is repairs are required, however they are not urgent, and or condition rating 3, which is repairs are required and these should be done as soon as possible, or further investigation is required. There are limitations to the inspection. We will aim to do all of the outside and inside, as well as outbuildings, where visible. We are limited to upper level elements to the height of our telescopic ladder, which is 3 meters. So some elements at roof level may not be visible. We do not change the fabric of the building, so we won't be lifting floorboards. However, if any floorboards are loose, then obviously we will look under those. We do not lift carpets, again, unless they are already loose. So very shortly we shall begin the inspection, and we will be breaking the various elements of the building down using the RICS format. For example, the external elements, E1 chimney stacks, E2 roof coverings, E2, E3 rainwater goods, etc. Before moving on to the internal elements, for example, F1 roof structure, F2 ceilings, F3 walls and partitions, etc. Now, before I do that, I am going to take some measurements of the flat itself for reinstatement value for the building's insurance. For example, how much would it cost to rebuild the flat if it was, for example, knocked down by a tornado, earthquake, etc. Clearly, because this is a flat, it is a guide only, because the reinstatement cost would be part of the wider house in this case. So before I make a start on the various elements, I am having regard to the wider environmental elements that may be at play. For example, here to our front we have common land, which creates potentially complications in itself. You can see here vehicles parked on the common. That is not official parking, and the customer needs to be made aware of that. It's important to establish that the property has sufficient access rights for both pedestrian and vehicular. In this case, the owner of the flat would use a separate side gate and pathway down here to access their flat to the rear. And the solicitor would need to ensure that sufficient rights were obtained over this land. So here to our rear we have a stream, and the land generally is marshy, which does represent a potential flood risk. However, in this particular case, we understand that since the drainage ditch was improved, the flood risk has been minimised. Also to our rear we have electrical pylons presenting a potential electromagnetic risk. The full extent of this is unknown. In this particular case they are approximately 300 metres away, so the risk is low. If the pylon was significantly closer, it might put some people off, particularly if they had babies and young children, etc. So I can see from looking at the chimney stack that some works are required. However, at the moment they're not critical. But the full extent of the repair works remain unknown until we move inside the roof structure to see whether or not there is any water ingress around the base of the stack. Looking at the chimney stack, around the base of the stack there are mortar flashings, and I can see that they are old and cracked and defective, and that is a likely source of water ingress. If we have a look at the shared stack on the right hand side, in complete contrast there are nice new LED flashings around that stack. Moving back to the left hand stack, we can see at the top of the stack the cement flaunching into which the chimney pot is set is also cracked and defective, and that needs replacing. Ideally there would be some form of cowl fitted on top of the chimney pot to prevent rainwater going inside the pot, although at the same time allowing for ventilation of the stack and the chimney breast. I'm also having regard to the TV aerial. Quite often there's corrosion or general deterioration of the metal elements. In this case it's not too bad, but of course they do require ongoing maintenance. So now looking at the roof covering, section E2, I'm making sure there's no sagging or deflection. I'm looking for broken or cracked or slipped roof tiles. In this case they are overlapping clay tiles. I'm looking at the ridge tiles along the ridge and making sure that the mortar bedding is tight and the ridge tiles are well bedded. In this particular case the roof appears to be in generally good order. Some of the ridge tiles may be slightly loose, however it's not significant at this stage. We will now move round and have a look at the other elements of the roof at the rear, where there is also a lead valley gutter, and they can generally be problematic. So here I'm looking at the rear roof slopes. There is quite a limited view, although if I back into the hedge here I can see most elements, and I can see that the lead valley gutter is clear and unobstructed, and I can't see any obvious slipped or broken tiles. However, in this particular case I may mention that ideally somebody would get up there with a long ladder just to be sure of that, but again it generally looks okay from here. So now we're going to look at the rainwater pipes and gutters, section E3, a very important part of the inspection, along with the main roof and of course the main walls. There is some damp penetration in the flat, which we will see in a minute. and it's essential to make sure that all the rainwater goods are tight and the water is being discharged where it should be. I see here directly above there is a section of the guttering that has been cut, which may be contributing. I'm also looking for other areas of obvious leakage, missing end caps, etc. It's a lot easier to do this obviously if it's raining heavily, because then you can see where all the leaks are. However, when it's dry, you can get a good indication, because sometimes the rainwater goods are stained and the walls are stained, etc. So now we're going to look at the external walls, section E4. So this is obviously the older part of the building, circa 1800, and to the rear of the property we have a more modern two-storey extension built circa 1975. On this front elevation wall, the main problem here is this climbing plant, which I think is wisteria. And whilst they are very lovely plants and they take an awfully long time to establish themselves, this is clearly causing a problem inside the first floor flat itself, where there is some significant dampness against that front wall, which we'll see in a minute. Sadly, in this particular case, I think we will be recommending that this plant is either severely cut back or possibly even removed, and the area beneath it is repointed. So what's happening here is the plant is holding moisture, and it's just soaking through the stonework. So now I'm looking generally at the walls. I'm looking at the pointing. I'm looking for any areas of cracking or bulging. There is some repointing required here on this gable end wall, but not critical. I can see here the lintel above this first floor timber window is cracked. In this particular case, I think that's it's got steel reinforcements, and what's probably happened is water has gotten in, and then the steel has corroded and then expanded. Again, it's not critical, but it's just going to get worse and worse. So on the rear elevation, no obvious problems here. I can't see any significant cracking or bulging. Repointing would be beneficial in due course, but again, not critical. Checking for making sure they're true, and there's no obvious bulging. I can see there are some general undulations, as is common of an age of this property of this age and type. Here, as we can see here at lower level, there's a damp-proof course or a DPC. And as is typical of a property of this age, it's poured bitumen, and that should be ideally approximately 300 millimeters from the external ground level. So it's a little bit high, but it's not too bad. And again, all the pointing's okay, no cracking, no major problems there. So the walls are generally okay. So it's just that front wall that needs some attention with the climbing plant, and then the repointing there for the damp ingress, which we'll see in a minute. Okay, so now I'm going to look at the windows. The windows are a combination of timber sash and casement single glazed units. I've already noticed some decay to some of them, and I'll climb up this ladder now and we'll have a look at that. They're generally quite well made, so we don't like to recommend replacing the windows. We try and recommend repairing them if at all possible, because they're generally quite well made, the older sash windows. So here on this window there's a little bit of decay here. I might give them a bit of a prod with a screwdriver. It's not too bad, but it does want to be the section cut out and filled and then redecorated. So we always open a certain number of the windows just to make sure that all's well, particularly the sash windows where they've got sash cords. So this one's a little bit stiff, but when it's given a bit of an overhaul and redecorated, they need to be eased at the same time. So now external doors. In this particular case, it's very easy that there is only one. So a timber door, single glazed door. I've just got my screwdriver. I might just give it a bit of a prod, and I can see here that there is some rot there. The screwdriver went straight in without much pressure. So again, that needs, well, in the first instance, it just needs filling and decorating, and then they can take a view whether or not they want to replace it in due course. So there is actually some heavier rot at the base of the door, as is quite common. Obviously, that's where the weather comes, tends to hit, as well as at the base of the frames. And we can see here, if I won't stick my screwdriver in because it will go straight through, but you can see there the decay in that corner. So starting to wrap up the external elements, we're now on section E8, other joinery and finishes, which is generally fascia and soffit boarding. The fascia boarding, in this case, we have timber fascia boarding onto which the guttering is set, and there's no other soffit boarding, and there's no other eaves level joinery elsewhere. So in this particular case, we have timber fascia boarding, and it generally looks to be absolutely fine. So now we're going to inspect the roof structure, section F1. It's my least favourite part of the job, and it's the least glamorous part of the job. My wife would definitely not do this job because she doesn't like spiders or cobwebs. It is, in fact, one of the more important sections of the job, along with E2 roof coverings, E4 main walls, and E3 rainwater goods, because you can tell quite a lot about a property from the roof structure, and we'll have a look at that now. And so here we can see that the secondary felt lining is quite severely torn, as it is in a number of places. There's two different felts. There's the more modern plastic felt, which was replaced sort of circa 1980, either at the time of the extension or shortly thereafter. But then elsewhere we have this older felt, which is brittle and on its way out and ultimately needs to be replaced. And so here we have a very small wasp's nest, fairly common. This is about as small as they get. They're usually inactive, as this one probably is. We can see trays of rat poison, so that is, or at least have been, rodents, which again is fairly common, nothing particularly to worry about, particularly in a 200-year-old house. And so here around this chimney stack we have some rot to the timber, quite a lot of it in fact, although if I test it with my damp meter there are no damp readings, and on this stack from the outside we saw that the flashings have been replaced with nice new LED flashings, which would appear to have resolved the problem, and so this rot is historic. It doesn't represent a particular issue, and all that is required is when the roof is next stripped and relaid, they'll probably just replace this section of timber here, so that's not a major problem. So generally throughout the roof space there is evidence of wood-boring beetle infestation or woodworm, which can also encompass death watch beetle, but I do not believe that to be the case here. So there is widespread historic woodworm. In most cases it's probably inactive, however there are one or two sections where this does appear to be active, and you can tell by the frass, it's called frass, or the dust that is created when the beetle leave the timber. Okay. So, back into the world of the living. That's the least glamorous part of the job. I am now going to go outside and brush myself off. Okay, so now I'm going to close up the loft hatch, take the ladder down. I will take particular care when I'm taking the ladder down. I'm going to collapse the ladder, and then I'm going to put my hand over so that the ladder doesn't mark the wall. If I put my hand there, then I can climb up, put the loft hatch back, And that's the roof structure. So now we're going to look at the ceilings, so section F2 ceilings. In this flat there are a combination of lath and plaster ceilings. These were superseded after the Second World War with plasterboard. It's easy to tell by, well, either from within the roof space you can see the laths, or you can just tap. And there we've got a dull thud, and they're lath and plaster ceilings. The older ones can be problematic and they can just fail at any time. But these ones generally appear okay, they're not spongy. So we'll go and have a look at the ceilings through here. And so these ceilings in the hallway are plasterboard, and you can tell that by tapping, which I'll do now, and it's more of a resonant hollow sound. And there, we can clearly tell the difference. The ceilings are generally fine, there's no major problems. There is some cracking along the joints of the plasterboard, but that's fairly common. They just need to be filled during redecoration. There's no major problems there. So now moving on to walls and partitions, the internal walls and partitions, section F3. So in this section we are checking for any internal settlement of the walls and partitions, and we're also going to get the moisture meter out and check for dampness. Along this front wall there is some significant dampness, as we have alluded to previously. So I can tell that this plaster is completely shot and it's damp. And we're getting lots of red readings here, and it's even damp, feels damp to the touch. And obviously that's potentially quite dangerous because we've got electrics there as well. Here along this front wall we do have a penetrating dampness to the external front elevation wall, and that would appear to be caused by the climbing plants and potentially the rainwater goods. I see here at upper level there is some condensation and mould, completely different to the penetrating dampness which we have here. The dampness persists in this room in exactly the same manner and is even more pronounced, and you don't need a moisture meter. You can tell very clearly that there's a problem. The walls are significantly stained and damp, and the plaster is defective. And so what needs to happen is the plaster up to the affected area needs to be removed, obviously the plant removed, which is the cause of the problem, the guttering fixed if that is also a contributory factor, and the walls then need to be allowed to dry out before being replastered and redecorated. So now we're going to look at floors, section F4 floors. I'm just going to be walking around. I'll be doing some stamping, some jumping. Usually at this point, if there's a dog in the property, then they go mad. I'm just checking that the floors are generally firm and level, and there's no significant bounce or deflection, etc. Okay, so section F5, fireplaces, chimney breasts and flues. In this particular case, there are chimney breasts within the property, however there are no fireplaces benefiting the property. So the fireplaces are used by the wider house below and to the side. For an unused chimney breast we would recommend that it is vented, however presumably the fireplace is open below. Okay, so section F6, built-in fittings. So we're going to look at the kitchen fittings here. The cupboards, I'll open them, a bit stiff there, but generally okay. And again, slightly dated, but perfectly functional. Okay, so next section, F7, internal joinery. So I'm going to look at the staircase. I'm going to look at the skirting boards. I'm looking for any decay to the timbers, rot, woodworm to any of the internal joinery. I'm also looking at the decorations and if any replastering is required, etc. So doors are a little bit stiff, but okay. Lovely old period doors there. Okay, skirting boards around this damp area here I'm going to pay particular attention to. Looking for rot. So there is a certain amount of moisture content there, but there doesn't appear to be any decay. However, they are at risk of decay if left too long, and wood boring, beetle infestation, etc. So moving into the bathroom, I'm checking the taps. So taps work okay. Make sure the sink's not loose against the floor. Again, the bath taps. I'm having a look at the seals around the bath, and I'll flush the loo as well. Make sure that all functions okay. Sometimes they're fitted with a Saniflow macerator, particularly basement flats, and they can be problematic. But there's no major problems here. So it's quite important to have an extractor fan fitted to bathrooms as well as in kitchens. Ideally that comes on when the light comes on and has a sort of timer of sort of 5-10 minutes. In this case there's no extractor fan, and you can see that there is some condensation and mould up there, which is fairly common. Okay, so now we're going to move into the services section. So firstly, G1 electrics. Clearly surveyors are not qualified electricians, so ultimately we do recommend a test of the electrical system upon change of ownership as a matter of course. However, we do give a commentary on obvious potential issues. For example, in this case, we can see here we do have quite an old fuse box or consumer unit, so I would certainly be recommending that a test is carried out anyway of the electrical system. However, in this case, the consumer unit does need to be upgraded. So now moving on to section G2, gas and oil. In this particular case, this flat has neither. The main house has oil, and there's no reason why this flat cannot have its own separate supply of oil and install oil central heating. However, the cooker is electric, as is the heating where there are wall-mounted night storage heaters. Normally, if we were doing a house or indeed a flat that had gas central heating, we're not qualified gas engineers, so all we'd be looking at is we'll look at the meter and make sure there's no obvious corrosion, etc. But again, we always recommend, in the case of gas, that it is checked upon change of ownership to make sure the gas supply is efficient and effective and safe. And in the case of oil, if it's a metal, an older metal corroded oil tank, some of the older ones have some corrosion, then we recommend that they get upgraded to a more modern plastic oil tank. So now we're going to do water. So here we have the internal water stop tap. There is another external one on the front lawn. There's not much to say about water in this particular case. We're just looking for any obvious leakage. There's no water tanks, but clearly if there were, which in most cases are up in the loft in a house, we'd be making a commentary about the water tanks, whether or not they might be of asbestos cement construction or metal, in which case they might need to be upgraded to more modern plastic versions. We'd be looking at the overflow pipes, the insulation, and also the tank support base for the water tanks. In this particular case, there is not much to comment on the water. I can't see any obvious leakage. The water's turned on, so it would appear to be okay. So, section G4, heating. In this flat, we have a number of wall-mounted electric heaters. There's not a great deal to say about these. Normally, in most cases, it's gas-fired central heating with press steel radiators, so we'd provide a comment. If the owner was there, we'd get them to start up the boiler, fill the radiators, check they're getting warm, estimate how old the boiler is, and provide a commentary on that, and also the rest of the central heating system, the type of piping used, which is usually copper piping, 15mm copper. So in this particular case, there's not much to comment on with the electric heating. The prospective purchaser may wish to install a wet central heating system, either, well, in most cases, gas, or in this case, oil, because we're rural. Okay, so moving on to section G5, water heating. In most cases, or a lot of cases, it's by the gas combination boiler. In this case, of course, we've got a hot water cylinder because there is no boiler. So here we have an older copper hot water cylinder with a loose insulation jacket. So it is poorly insulated, as you can tell, and there's quite a lot of heat loss going on, not only from this section, but also from this section as well. So, and here we have the electric immersion heater. So I think really I would be recommending that is upgraded to a more modern hot water cylinder which is factory insulated. I'm also looking at the overflow pipes, and there's no obvious corrosion. It's generally functional but just dated and would benefit from being upgraded. Okay, so now we're going to move into section G6, drainage. So I'm going to be lifting the drainage inspection chamber, which I have already identified as just being out there at the rear, and I'm also going to have a look at the soil and vent pipe. So I only need 2 pieces of kit for this. I have a drainage key. I've got 2 of those, but in most cases I just use a drainage key and a screwdriver. So I'll go downstairs and lift that now. Okay, so this is a nice easy inspection chamber to lift, and I can tell that there's no major problems there. What I might quickly do is run upstairs and flush the loo, and then come back to downstairs and make sure that that's all running away. So there we are, we can see that that's nice and free running. The inspection of the drainage is quite an important part of the survey. Firstly, to ensure that it's free running and running away, that it's not blocked by waste or sometimes mortar build up, etc. But also to have a look at the type of the pipes used, particularly ex-local authority properties. They use pitch fibre for the material of the drains, and they can collapse, causing all sorts of problems. Okay, so here we are with the soil and vent pipe, plastic construction. There's no obvious problems here. Quite often they're iron and they can be corroded, and quite often asbestos cement construction as well, and they just need to be upgraded, particularly if they're metal and corroding. I'm also having a look at the top of the stack to make sure that it's capped to allow for ventilation of the flue, but to stop birds and vermin getting in. So we're wrapping up the inspection now. There were some elements that we would normally continue to do, for example, garage. In this case there isn't one. Outbuildings, in this case there are none. And grounds and boundaries generally. In this case we've got dry stone walling to the front with some timber fencing, hedges and shrubs, and they're all in reasonable order. So now I'm going to apply a condition rating to each of the elements. Condition rating 3 is a repair is required immediately or further investigations. Condition rating 2 is repair works are required but they're not critical. Condition rating 1 is normal routine maintenance only. And there's a further condition rating which is not inspected, obviously in this case, for example, the garage and outbuildings. The report can appear slightly bland for some elements if there's a lot of 2s, which is just unfortunate, but it's just the way it is. And quite often with older properties like this, there are repair works required, but they're just not critical. And in this case, the first few items are in fact condition rating 2. So chimney stacks, which is a 2, on the basis of the cracked cement flashings around the base of the stack, and also the cement flaunching at the top of the stack. So repair works are required, but it's not critical. We did test for dampness inside the roof space, and there was no damp reading, so it would appear that it's not leaking. If it were, then that would be upgraded to a condition rating 3. The roof coverings, they're generally okay. The secondary felt lining, which we clearly saw inside the roof structure, was torn and ripped in a number of places, and the older felt lining is on its way out. So at some point in the medium term, they will be stripping the roof covering and reusing the clay tiles but laying down a nice, new, modern, breathable secondary barrier. So I think I'm going to put that as a 2. It's works that are required, but it's not critical at this stage. The rainwater pipes and gutters. No obvious problems, however there's potential leakage at the front of the house, going over that front wall into the wisteria there, particularly that section that had been cut. I would also advise them to check the rainwater goods when it's raining heavily, just to identify the areas that are leaking. The guttering is fairly old, it's probably 15 years old or thereabouts. So again, it's of that age where some sections need to be replaced, but it ultimately appears functional. The main walls, again, I've put these as a 2. Whilst we have the penetrating dampness coming through that front elevation there, and there will be some repointing that's required, the main issue is that wisteria, and I'm going to flag that up as an urgent repair, and I'll do that in a later section. So the main walls are also a 2. The windows and the doors, there is some decay. I think I might put the windows as a 3 because I think that they do need to be looked at. I'm going to put the outside doors as a 2. E7, conservatory and porches, not inspected. E8, other joinery and finishes. The timber fascia boarding is fine, no problems at all, condition rating 1. E9, other. So in this section we wrap up any other external elements that haven't been already dealt with in section E1 through to E8. Such things as roof terraces, balconies, steps, handrails, etc. In this case we've got the climbing wisteria plant to the front, so I'm going to deal with that in section E9, and I'm going to put that as a 3. That to me is the main problem, which is a great shame to lose that, but I see that as being the main issue, so I'm going to put E9 other as condition rating 3. So moving on internally, roof structure. Generally the roof structure was sound. There is some localised woodworm that does appear to be active, however at this stage it's quite minor. Some might put it as condition rating 3, it's quite subjective. I'm going to put it as condition rating 2, but I would advise the customer on the telephone after the inspection that they really should deal with it sooner rather than later. The wasp nests, there's a couple of small wasp nests, I'm not particularly worried about them, probably inactive. There is some rot to the timbers around the chimney stack. The source of the dampness has now been resolved, so there's new lead flashings around that particular stack. And again, they might replace that section when the roof covering is stripped in 5-10 years time and a new secondary felt laid. So just replace those affected timbers there. So that's roof structure condition rating 2. Ceilings, combination of plasterboard and lather and plaster, generally okay, condition rating 1. Walls and partitions. So it's in this section that we deal with dampness. Clearly we've got significant penetrating dampness along this front wall here, and this will require the plaster to be stripped off because it's all sodden, and then to allow the walls to dry out, and then replastered and redecorated, and that will take some time, can take over 6 months to dry out. So that's condition rating 3. Floors, in this case it's a suspended timber ground floor, no problems at all, slightly undulating but not unusual in a property of this age and type. Fireplaces, chimney breasts and flues. Well, they serve the main house, so there's no fireplace in this section, so that's condition rating not inspected. Built-in fittings, so we've got the cupboards and the kitchen fittings, slightly dated and basic, but generally functional, no problems, condition rating 1. Internal joinery, redecoration is required, clearly obviously here, and some replastering. The internal timber is generally fine. There is a fairly high moisture content in the skirting boards in the area affected by dampness. It is possible that some rot may be discovered, however I haven't found any here today. Woodworm does require only a 14% moisture content in timber to be active, and there is such moisture content here, however no active woodworm was found. So I'm going to put that as a condition rating 2, and clearly some redecoration works are required. Bathroom fittings, everything's fine and functional, no obvious leakage, and all the water services work, so that's condition rating 1. Section F9 other, this includes such things as integral garages, common parts, cellars and loft conversions. In this case not applicable, so that's not inspected. Services, so electricity and gas are generally always a 3 on the basis that they require to be checked by a qualified electrician or gas engineer. In this case there's no gas or oil serving the flat itself, so the gas and oil would be not inspected. Water, there's no tanks to inspect, but the water is on and there's no obvious leakage. Copper pipe work, that's condition rating 2. Heating, we have electric wall-mounted heaters only. There is no wet central heating system, so that's not inspected. The hot water cylinder, I didn't turn it on. I assume it's functioning okay, however it's dated and ultimately needs replacing with a nice new copper hot water cylinder and immersion heater with factory insulation, and that's condition rating not inspected. Drainage. So we've got free-flowing drains to the rear. We lifted the manhole cover there. All appears to be well. It's a shared drainage system running across the rear of the terrace, and we flushed the loo and we can tell that it's free-flowing. The soil and vent pipe is plastic and no obvious defects, condition rating 2. Garage and outbuildings, there are none, so that's condition rating not inspected. We have now reached the end of the HomeBuyers inspection. So what we would do now is the surveyor would go away and dictate the report. It would be typed, in our case, by an external typing organisation, and then the surveyor would make his amendments, tell the admin team that the amendments have been made and that the report is ready to go to the customer, and then the customer would expect to receive the report within 5 working days. The same day, I will pick up the phone to the prospective purchaser and I will talk them through everything that I've found, which will put the report that they will receive in due course into perspective. They can then wait for the report and ring me at any time to talk about any concerns that they may have. Thank you very much. That's the end of that.